under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to congratulate our new board member. Welcome Mr. Jack Carbonat to the table. And I'd like to welcome our returning members, Mr. Talbot and Mrs. McKinnon. All three have been sworn in. I'd like to thank our school district clerk who came before the meeting this evening to swear our three members in. So we will begin. Our first order of business will be the election of officers. So I will begin by asking for nominations for the position of chair, please.
I'll make a nomination. I'd like to nominate Heather Trapaz.
Okay,
for
we
chair.
have a nomination for Mrs. Trapaz. Do we have any other nominations for the position of chair? Seeing none, all those casting a vote in favor of Mrs. Trapaz as chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that is a plurality of the vote. And with that, I'm happy to hand it over to Mrs. Trapaz.
Thank you, everyone. All right, so we need a nomination for vice chair.
I nominate Caroline.
Okay, Ginny, is there anyone else? No? Seeing none, then I'll ask for a plurality of votes for Caroline as vice chair. Everyone say yes.
At this point, but when it comes in.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so it's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you.
So it's right here.
All right, so we have a public hearing tonight first on accepting the SAFE grants by the State of New Hampshire Public School Infrastructure. Do you want to talk about that, Scott?
Yes, Steve, you're going to have to, he's picking up on the mic, so. So tonight we have the acceptance of the SAFE grant on the agenda, so it's a public hearing. So for those in the community, Goffstown was awarded a substantial amount of money for projects at all of our schools. Those include access controls. So that's the pretty much the key fobs that allow you electronic access. Emergency alerting, which is panic buttons, strobes, etc. And then the last one was security or surveillance type cameras. So all told, Goffstown was awarded $383,572.04, and I'll go through the breakdowns of each school. At Bartlett Elementary School, the grant was in the amount of $39,364.78, and that was for emergency alerting and security cameras. Glen Lake School was awarded $44,207.26, and that was for access controls and security cameras. Maple Avenue School was awarded the maximum amount, which is $100,000 per school, and Maple Avenue received monies for access controls, emergency alerting, and security cameras. Mountain View Middle School was awarded the maximum $100,000 award that will be used exclusively for security cameras. And lastly, Goffstown High School also awarded the maximum amount, $100,000 for security cameras. I should let the board and the community know that there was a need at Goffstown High School in order to replace our existing analog cameras with digital cameras. There was a need for about $157,000 worth of equipment, and we were awarded $100,000. So the IT director and our facilities director are scaling back that project. It doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to have security cameras where we need them. It just means that not all of them will be digital cameras. The digital ones are a bit better, but the analogs will be fine for the time being, and we'll look to replace those, when we can. So all told, again, over $383,000. The other good piece of information that we received was that there is a wait list. So there was a lot more projects that were requested that were not fulfilled. Good news is that Bartlett Elementary School is on the wait list, and they are third on a very long wait list for access controls, and the amount of $26,570. So there's a really strong likelihood that Bartlett will receive some additional funding. So with that, We do anticipate after tonight, once the board, after the public hearing, that hopefully there'll be a vote to accept and expend those grant funds. Mr. Bourget has worked with the business office, so we are ready to go on purchase orders and working with our vendor for these projects so that they can happen before the beginning of next school year. So kind of where we're at. So I want to thank not only our IT director, Stephen Bourget, our facilities director, Randy Loring, but also Gary Geralaman, who was our former IT director, who really helped get these grants in. And just as a reminder, the window opened up at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and and we were both Gary and Steve were in there getting these grants in. That window, the funding closed because there was not enough money by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was first come, first serve.
So again, this just shows the importance of being ready, of having projects already identified, having all of the bids already in, doing all of the homework ahead of time. This allowed us to get right on that list this year.
Yeah.
So we're appreciative of that.
All right, thank you, Scott. So we're going to open up to public comment. If anybody has any public comment on the hearing, now would be the time. No? All right, so we'll close it. Is there any questions from any board members? Comments? No? All right, so we're going to need to make a motion for this.
I'll do it. I move that the Goffstown School District accept and expend the New Hampshire Safe Grant Round 3 award in the amount of $383,572.04 as presented. Said grant to be used for emergency alerting, security cameras, and access control projects at all of the school district's 5 schools.
Thank you, Caroline. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Shane. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. And I will close public hearing. And now we'll get on to our regular school board meeting here. So we have correspondence?
None this evening.
No? Okay. Your turn, Lil. Accommodations, good news.
Student Council is going to their winter conference tomorrow at Timberlane High School. Goffstown High School hosted a very successful large group festival this past Saturday for the music department. National Art Honor Society and National Music Honor Society are having their inductions this Wednesday. And finally, spring sports tryouts are this week.
Wow. Thank you. Go ahead, Wendy.
Thank you. Over at Mountain View, they raised $1,215 for the Liberty House. The Liberty House is in Manchester, and it helps veterans in the community struggling to reacclimate from serving our country. They accepted a lot of different donations, from toiletries to clothing, so a big thank you to everybody who participated in that. MVP did candy bar bingo last week, and it was a big success, so thank you to all of our parents who donated their time and their candy for an after-school event. Mountain View will be holding a 7th grade transition night on Tuesday, April 2nd at 6 o'clock. That will be for students and their families to come in and be able to take a tour and to learn a little bit more about Mountain View. And then for our incoming 5th graders, they will also be hosting a transition night on Tuesday, April 4th at 6 o'clock. And again, families are welcome to bring their kids with them, tour the building, and get to know a little bit more about Mountain View. Over at Bartlett, they received a number of training opportunities on virtual reality. If you'll remember, last year we used some Title I monies to buy VR headsets for the classroom. So our IT department was able to do some training with them to really get to know those, better than they had, to be able to get some new experiences for our students. The Literacy Committee is working with the Fisher Cats for their Reading Challenge tradition. Students write down the titles of 5 books they've read this year, and they get to choose a Fisher Cats game they'd like to go to. So a special thank you to Fisher Cats for working with our students. Last week, the Math PLC over at Bartlett met with Goffstown High School, and they had a lot of discussion about how the high school could help over at Bartlett to get kids excited about math. So what's going to start happening is about 6 to 8 Goffstown High School National Honor Society kids are going to go into the classroom and are going to talk to kids about why math is important and try to get them excited from the younger generation about, what do we use math for in our everyday life? So a special thank you to the high school for making this happen. We're going to pilot it there and perhaps move it over to Maple Ave as well. So we're pretty excited about that. And on Friday, March 29th, the UNH Theater and Dance performers will present the play Molly McFoley and the Littlest Leprechaun in their all-school meeting. Over at Bartlett, Maple Ave, and Mountain View, they've been doing their writing assessments for the New Hampshire SAS. So that window has just closed. And we'll be ready for our math and other LA sections in early April. And over at Glen Lake, the parent group has been reinvigorated and is taking on some new projects this spring. They're running an Eco Drive fundraiser, accepting donations of textile items starting in March. They'll be providing volunteers for our first book fair since the pandemic in April. And they'll be hosting a bike safety rodeo at Glen Lake the morning of April 13th. So a special thank you to the parents for making that happen.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Anyone else? Commendations, good news? Go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, just a quick one. You reminded me about the writing testing going on. Mountain View sent home a great little form for parents to encourage their kids. So they encourage the parents to write a little note, hey, you're going to do great, whatever you wanted to put on there. So I thought that was a really nice touch. They put the dates that different grades would have different kinds of testing so the parents can help encourage their kids at home. So I thought that was great. I also saw some parents asking online about tutoring resources, so I thought it might be a good time to remind parents that one of the things the state does offer is free services through tutor.com. So all students in New Hampshire, I think it's 4 to 12?
Yep, starting in fourth grade,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And fourth grade is new. Previous to that, it was sixth grade, so they just lowered it down to fourth grade. People who haven't used that, Wendy, why don't you share a little bit of information about
Nicole,
it?
thank you for mentioning that. So students can access that right through their Schoology account. So you can't get it through your parent account, but if you have your child log in, they can get on there through tutor.com and be able to get whatever they need. I will mention for those kids that are getting ready for the SAT, there are practice tests for the SAT and there are modules in there. So knowing that deadline is right around the corner, I highly recommend families take a look at that.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Nicole. Were you set?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Anyone else? Commendations, good news? Go ahead, Retta.
I know there will be a more formal recognition, but I just like to acknowledge all the years of service of Ellen Vermachwitz, who did not
Yes.
return. She
Absolutely.
served many times off and on, so
Yep.
put in a lot of hours.
Thank you, Retta. Anyone else? Commendations, good news? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of March 4th school board meeting. Anybody see anything?
I think you skipped public comment.
Did I skip public comment? Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. Public comment. Is there any public comment tonight? Nope, sorry. Thank you, Brian.
No.
We do.
We do?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, how are you? You know the spiel.
Yep, Nancy Biederman, Byam Road, New Boston. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Welcome back. Welcome to the new, one new, right?
Yep, one new.
I have everything straight. On Monday, March 11th, there was a presentation by Wendy Kohler to the C&E committee about the young adult books at Mountain View Middle School. Wendy presented a well-thought-out and detailed explanation of the current library uses and what constitutes a YA book. I was very impressed with the presentation. I'm not sure exactly what she will mention to the board tonight, as I'm sure her hour-long presentation won't be repeated. There's a few points that I'd like to bring to the board's attention. 1, YA books are written for 12 to 18-year-olds. That is a huge age range and a huge range of maturity. The term YA was first used regularly in the 1960s in the United States. The YA category includes most of the genres found in adult fiction and nonfiction, with themes that include friendship, sexuality, drugs, alcohol, and language, and sexual identity. Second, both the New Boston and Goffstown public libraries separate their YA fiction section from the children and adult sections. I called both and confirmed that. Nonfiction YA books are in the adult sections but are labeled YA. Third, the most popular types of books checked out from the Mountain View Middle School Library are graphic novels and manga, which are Japanese anime books. Graphic novels and manga books are stories that are presented in a comic strip format and published as a book. It was stated that the majority of the books in the YA section are nonfiction, and I would like you to know that graphic novels and manga books are labeled as nonfiction according to the Library of Congress. Fourth, the permission slip to opt students into YA books should be extended to 7th and 8th graders, not just 5th and 6th graders, and especially to New Boston parents. Parents should be made aware of the materials that are available at the Mountain View Middle School Library. In its own permission slip to access YA books, Mountain View Middle School Library states that YA books are generally written for high school-aged readers and contain mature themes, which I am sure most parents are not aware of. Finally, while the survey that was sent out shows that Mountain View Middle School is doing more than most schools, it does not mean that we should keep things as status quo. The presentation that was brought forth, or this presentation that Wendy did, was brought forth because a group of concerned parents wanted to reassess how the YA books were stored, among other reasons, and how students of all ages had access to these books when they entered the library. We shouldn't stoop to the lowest level, but we should lead the pack in the best practices for the students at Mountain View Middle School. And I have a second topic, sorry. I'm bringing forth and would like to make you aware of School Board Policy BFE. It states, in the absence of established school board policy or school board direction, the superintendent of schools shall assume responsibility for whatever direction or action is taken. In such instances, principals or other administrative or instructional personnel shall gain the approval of the superintendent before taking any action. In the situations which arise within the schools where the board has provided no guides for administrative action, the superintendent shall have the power to act, but his or her decisions shall be subject to review and ratification by action by the board at its regular meeting. It shall be the duty of the superintendent to inform the board promptly of such action and the need for policy. Since the passage of RSA 193-38, discrimination in public schools, on September 17th, 2019, has the SAU 19 superintendent put forth a bathroom policy. I've searched the Goffstown School Board minutes of 2019, and I can't find any mention of bathroom policy. The superintendent has allowed his administration, without board approval, to change the unwritten bathroom policies of the district. The unwritten policy was that bathrooms were segregated based on biological sex. According to policy BFE, why has the superintendent not put forth a policy in 5 years? Why are policy decisions being made without the school board or the public's knowledge? Where is the transparency? Per Goffstown Board Policy ACAC, Title 9 of the Education Amendments Act of 1972, as well as RSA 193-38, among others, the district should not and does not discriminate based on sex in its educational programs and activities, including employment and admissions. All forms of sex-based discrimination, including sexual harassment, are prohibited in the district. Like most forms of sexual harassment, there's also an unhealthy power differential between schools and the students who are pressured to share private facilities such as bathrooms and locker rooms in this way. Many students are exceedingly uncomfortable, but at this young age, students would often rather endure the sexual harassment than risk the harassment and stigma that comes with going against the authority of the school on this issue. Students should not have to navigate sharing private facilities, places that are set apart for the removal of clothing outside of the presence of the opposite sex. Allowing the opposite
Nancy,
biological
you're
sex...
about 3 minutes. Are you almost done?
Yep. Allowing the opposite biological sex to use the bathrooms at any school in the SAU 19 is sexual harassment, therefore is sufficient to justify them having sex-based separation of private facilities. Based on the current RSA 193-39 discrimination prevention policy required, each school district and charter public schools shall develop a policy that guides the development and the implementation of a coordinated plan to prevent, assess the presence of, intervene, and respond to the incidents of discrimination. When is the Goffstown School Board going to make a bathroom policy to protect the students at Goffstown? I have U.S. Supreme Court cases and U.S. District Court cases that state that bathrooms and locker rooms can be segregated based on biological sex.
All right, Nancy, I think we're done now.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you want to give that all to Denise so she could put it in the minutes?
I'll email you.
That
like I
would be
have been.
appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Is there anyone else for public comment? Sure, come on up. Hi, Laura, you know
Hi,
the
I
drill.
do.
State your name and address.
Laura Stevens, Orchard Hill Road. I wasn't planning on speaking, actually. I just would like to remind the board that when there is harassment, in the case of the things that were spoken about tonight, it is overwhelmingly that it is the trans child, or whatever the case is, that experiences the harassment and the bullying, not the cisgender student who is using the restroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Anyone else? Yeah, come on up. Hi. State your name and address for the minutes, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Fike Jenkins, 245 Wallace Road in Goffstown. Just wanted to speak to two issues
Sure.
in light of other public comments this evening. First, I believe strongly that children should be able to go to the bathroom in which they identify by their gender. That's all I want to say about that. I think that's right for the safety and well-being of our students, and appreciate whatever further consideration you're going to give that topic. Second, I also had the tremendous pleasure of attending the March 11th C&E committee meeting and heard the very detailed presentation that Wendy provided, and I have deep respect for everyone who participated in the information gathering in preparation for that presentation. It was very detailed. I've been a librarian for 39 years. Most of that in higher education and in the legal setting, not in K-12. But because of my experience in higher education, I've had deep awareness of the scaffolding and information literacy planning that goes on, and instruction that goes on in the grades leading up to to higher education. And I think that the combination of the information literacy work and the other best practices that Mountain View Middle School is clearly engaged in and the school district is engaged in are very laudable. I also think that the survey that was conducted to do some comparison of current practices versus practices, say, 5 years ago, really showed that that Goffstown School District has taken this all of the aspects of policy into consideration. Not that there isn't room to revisit some of that and to grow and to just sort of check to make sure that we're at the right, offering the right kinds of practices and engaged in the right kind of policies. But I would note that overall, our school is somewhat more conservative in its policies than many of the school districts throughout the state. And I think there's really good indication that the labeling of books, for example, and the description of books as YA is absolutely right on target and the right sort of thing for Goffstown. Maybe a little more judicious and cautious than some other school districts, but probably just right. And I think that I just wanted to shout out a little praise for
Thank you.
what our media specialists are doing. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Anyone else have public comment? No? All right, then I'm going to close public comment, and we're going to now move on to the approval of the minutes from March 4th. Anybody see anything? All right, I'll take a motion.
Motion to approve the minutes from the March 4th meeting.
Thank you, Caroline. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
By Retta. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. All right, committee reports, A and F. Go ahead, Dan.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve a manifest this evening in the amount of $2,537,019.91.
Thank you, Dan. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
By Caroline. Go ahead, Dan.
And if I may, as my voice seems to be failing, Scott, or Caroline or Scott, would you like to go through this?
Yeah, I can do it.
Thank you, Scott.
All right, so the manifest tonight Payroll, taxes, and benefits, a little over $1.9 million. For special ed activity, a little over $103,000. That was comprised of a few things. Manchester School District, we share in a transportation cost agreement with them. That was a little over $21,000. Jessica Vermette is SPED contracted services. For those of you who are here in the audience, if we cannot employ someone to provide services, we do have to contract out, especially if it's required under a student's IEP. Lighthouse School, a little over $13,000 for out-of-district services. Literacy Learning Solutions, again, special ed contracted services, a little over $6,500. Parker Education, also out-of-district tuition, $6,700 and change. And lastly, Seven Hills, a little over $44,000, again, out-of-district services. In terms of general expenses, the board, the A&F committee this evening, periodically they review all of the Amazon invoices. The district, this particular manifest spent $7,329 on books, equipment, and supplies, and a couple of times a year, the A&F committee actually looks at every single Amazon invoice, and they did that this evening. Blue In Services, those were HVAC and plumbing repairs, a little over $10,000. You'll see some common ones on there, such as Home Depot for facility supplies. One that you don't often see is the town of Goffstown. In our budget, we do pay for Goffstown Television and Parks and Recreation Services. That's something we've been doing for the last several years. Before that, we paid for an SRO. And the $44,180 represents one half of that payment. And then lastly, Wally Computer, $51,881. That's our ongoing Wi-Fi upgrade across the school district. For food service, we did have to replace a milk cooler and a freezer at Bartlett. That was a little over $6,800, and we paid $8,700 for food and commodities, so. that was it
Anybody
for
have any
the manifest.
questions? Go ahead, Jerry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian, we used to have a HVAC person here at the district, but we no longer have that person, correct?
That's correct. So we had a position, it was a challenge for us to staff it. We ended up having a great person in that role. Unfortunately, that person passed away, and after that, we have had tremendous difficulty filling that position.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Jared. Anyone else? Questions, comments? All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. There's no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. Thank you, Scott.
All right, next on the A&F was the ESSER grant update, and we just had this, so I just want to give the board a little bit of an update because Wendy and I have been spending a lot of time on this. But, so we submitted the ESSER grant for the Mountain View science curriculum, and it got kicked back because it included future years of digital access, which we put in our write-up, although the vendor didn't put that in their quote or their invoice to us. So the state wants it broken down, or they wanted to say that those charges are complimentary. So many curriculum vendors will charge you for a book, and then they give you digital access and the teacher workbook and other things as complimentary. So Wendy has to go back and get that. So not everything works out well in the grant world, and so we're spending more time on that. But what they did share, and I wanted to share this with the board, was that they also sent back a couple of other grants, and they basically said that, oops, we made a mistake on this, and now we want you to get some more vendor quotes, even though they've already approved the grant, we've already spent the money. So Wendy and I will now be spending hours upon hours doing that fun work. So grants are fun.
Oh, wait, Nicole
Yeah.
had a
Do we
hand up.
expect any problem actually getting the science curriculum, or is it just sort of get
No,
the
it's
administrative work done?
yeah, it's we'll get it done.
Okay.
It's just not without
More time.
a little headache and aggravation. So
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
The other thing that I wanted to share with you, and Jack, this will be your first official duty, is we have what's called the MS-22, and this is the vote of the appropriations that the community voted on. So I know the superintendent's going to go over the default budget, what that looks like, but this is the budget that the voters approved last Tuesday. It does not include any of those new items that were in that new column, a little over $307,000. So with that, it does include the petition warrant article of $13,000 that the voters approved, and it also includes using $250,000 from the unassigned fund balance projection. So this gives the school district the authorization to spend a total of $55,664,923. So now it's John on this, even though it's Jack, and then it's Virginia, even though it's Jenny, because they want. So, and there's two that you have to, so you can sign where you are and then pass them down. And then that gets uploaded to the Department of Revenue Administration, kind of a formality, but that is what we are legally allowed to spend in the next school year. So, the last thing that that we talked about at A&F, and I don't think, Brian, that you're going to be talking about, bills and stuff, but this is, I received this from the New Hampshire School Boards Association. There were a lot of, and there are every year, a lot of bills that are with respect to either education, municipal government, that pertain to the school district. There was one bill in particular that I gave you folks a copy of. Denise, right? We put that in their packets, I think,
Yeah.
right? And it's House Bill 1002, and it has to do with the right to know law. So this particular floor amendment is going to take place. It's going to get voted on this Thursday. And ordinarily, we don't always bring these to you. There's, like I said, there's a couple of hundred of these things. I received a phone call from Representative Joe Alexander on Saturday, and he shared this copy of this amendment. It's supposedly a bipartisan amendment. It has to do with the right to know law. So I think we've shared with you before that we have received a lot of right to know requests over the last year. They are very time consuming. Some of them are, many of them are. And essentially what this does is it allows, if you look at especially line number 27 and line number 30, it allows the public body the opportunity to have a conversation or an email exchange with the requester, asking them to redefine the scope of their request, to make, if it is easier for the municipality or school district to comply with that. So sometimes we will get requests for, hypothetically, 10, 20 years of records. And we might say to that individual, well, electronically, we have it for 5. If you want it, we can get you the 5 years like that. But if you want 10 or more, it could take 2 months to get that. And there could be a cost because we have to go into the basement, pull the paper record, make the photocopy, et cetera. So this would allow, this compromise would allow for that conversation to take place between either the town of Goffstown or the town or a school district. It also, under line number 30, it kind of holds harmless municipalities and school districts from doing what's called a good faith effort to redact information. So a lot of times records are requested, but if there are names associated with it or other things that are sensitive information, the municipality or the school district has to redact that. And if for some reason a redaction doesn't take place and there's a civil matter that is instituted, it gives the municipality or school district a little bit of immunity with respect to that. So this is not a perfect amendment to this bill, but it's a step in the right direction. And Representative Alexander wanted to know what this board thought about that. He was asking for your opinion. He was inclined to vote in favor of it, but it was one that he knew was important and he reached out. So not every rep does that. So I wanted to at least bring that forward to you. We did discuss it at the A&F committee, and Caroline, Heather, or Dan, if you wanted to chime in. But this one, if you want me or the superintendent to send communication to our other state reps asking that they support this floor amendment, we will do that on your behalf.
Anybody?
I would just add that I think these changes are reasonable. I think they make sense. I agree with Scott. I don't think that this is maybe exactly what we might want, but I think it's a step in the right direction. And the reality is, right-to-know requests take a lot of time.
Nicole?
Yeah, you both said this isn't exactly what you would want. Is it worth outlining what you actually would want when we get, I mean, it's probably too late to get into this version if they're voting on it, but maybe it's worth putting together so that our reps are aware what will look good from our perspective.
Yeah, if I couldn't, Nicole, that I think you're right. Because of the time constraints, and this one originally was deemed, I think, inexpedient to legislate, and then it got brought back. So right now, this is going to go to the House floor for a vote on Thursday, and ordinarily, we wouldn't bring this to you if it was just going to a subcommittee, but it's going to go for a full House floor vote, and again, it's not perfect. I think we're going to have to wait until next year to do that, but
I would say it does look, it does look like it might reduce some of the burden on our administrators. And just so anybody that doesn't have this in front of them knows, it says that the municipality would sort of be off the hook only if they've made a reasonable, like, good faith effort on the redaction. So I think that's a positive thing.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyone else?
Me.
Ginny?
I do know that this is like kind of a Band-Aid. I would say yes to it, but I know at one time we were talking about almost having to need to hire a person to deal with the influx of right-to-know that we were getting at one point. So I think this might help with that and decreasing at least some of the load on the 10-year thing, but I don't think it's a perfect one either.
Go ahead, Dan.
The bill does maintain, from what I can read, transparency. It doesn't disallow the public from getting what they were looking for. It actually, I think, makes a reasonable compromise of the ability for a petitioner and the governmental entity that has been asked to get data to talk before the data gets submitted. And I think that has been very important, and I believe I have heard that has already occurred, not as a codified RSA, but as something that some governmental entities have been reaching out to petitioners saying, hey, what about this? But this now, since it's in writing and could be adopted, would give those other governmental entities a better understanding of what they can and can't do. But we still have to maintain our transparency. And there's nothing in here that I read that dilutes that at all.
Thanks, Dan.
Although, just for giggles, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
A right-to-know request is a right to know, and it's to be fulfilled upon the ability of the governmental entity in order to fulfill it. The right to correspond. So if it's going to take 2 years to get into the deep bowels of some kind of basement to get things, you just communicate that out and say this is where it is. And the petitioner, if they don't feel that is correct, has a methodology to either, I believe, go to the new ombudsman or court and say, gee whiz, I don't think that's fair, and both sides can come together and say, hey, that's the way it is. So this kind of helps, I think.
Thanks, Dan. Anyone else? Go ahead, Jared.
Looking at it, I agree with what you're saying about the ability to kind of negotiate the scope of the right to know request. Just one thing that I'm concerned with, lines 13 through 15, we talk about cost. Is that a way to stifle somebody's right to know if we're starting to charge for everything? I know that in paragraph 8, we talks about no cost for the first 250 communications. Is that holistically based on the governing body? Or is that between the individual that's petitioning for 250 communications, as an example? I'd hate to be the right to know, submit a right to know request, be like, you're the 250 first, and therefore you have to pay, while the 250 didn't. I don't know the answer to that question. That's the only concern I have with how I'm reading this. So I don't want it to be a way to discourage people from putting right to know requests, knowing that we should be able to have the ability to negotiate the scope of those right to know requests.
Yeah. Do you have a comment or anything on that, Scott?
Yeah, I would say, though, that there are different types of right to know requests, and I think it's fair enough that from what I have seen is that when someone asks for something under the right to know, and it's fairly easy to get that, we provide it. But when you get a right to know request that someone wants 10 or 20 years of email correspondence with a word in it or something, like, that's a different story. Or if you want, years and years of budgets, or, and it requires you to go into a basement, to do it, there is the cost of staff time, to do some of that. So I think it's a delicate balancing act. I think the statute is pretty clear that governmental agencies don't have the ability just to make a wanton estimate. $3,000 for no. As a matter of fact, this particular piece of legislation, it's a pretty steep. It's 250. What's the word I'm looking for? It's in the statute.
It says communications.
Communications. So, barring us having to go into the basement to procure stuff, we can't always charge. We can't even charge sometimes for staff time. So if it could, so just so everybody knows, this particular bill had previously was amended to say that if a governmental agency incurred more than, I think it was 8 or 10 hours.
It was
10 hours of time, okay? Then you can charge. I mean, do you realize how much 10 hours of time is for someone to get it, redact it, etc.? And again, sometimes these requests are good. Sometimes I don't know. They're just looking for words. So
I think it's important for the board to know that we believe in supporting transparency. So if somebody wants documents that have been through this board, that's perfectly appropriate. But I want the board to know that the right to know law is also abused significantly. It's used as a tool of destruction. It's used as a tool to occupy administrators' time. It's sometimes used as a marketing ploy. One of the frequent ones we get are vendors looking for the names of our teachers who teach certain subjects so they can try to sell them things. So it's important for the board to know that, yes, this is about transparency of government, but it's also misused. It's misused.
And I would also say that there's a lot of things that are put on our website. So financials, curriculum material, a lot of these things are, and I think more and more we're putting even more on websites for people. And I shared it with the folks on A&F, but now the state has on their website has reports called iExplore, and that has class size, average cost per pupil. It has like 25 different metrics that go back 5, 7, 10 years. So that's a wonderful thing that the state did. So all of these reports that we send to the state, they're now one-stop shopping. So folks don't have to correspond and do a right to know request. If you want that information, it's already on this new website, and you can compare school district to school district across, like, I think 25 different metrics. So If anything, there was way more transparency now than there ever was.
So Retta, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to, this has been a great conversation. I just wanted to remind everyone that we have access to the New Hampshire School Board Association webinars, and they did have one on Right to Know that had to be postponed. You can they're typically webinars, you don't have to be there in person. You also have access to all of the recordings, so if any of the topics are of interest to you, it's a really great way to get a broad overview and some of these issues that are coming up, so.
Go ahead, Nicole.
I think it's worth noting that the cost information is not part of the edit, correct? Like, that's already all there.
That's
The
already
only
there.
thing that's being added is that you would add that itemized list to the communication.
Right.
So,
Thank you, Nicole. So we've had good discussion. What direction do we want to give Scott with Joe Alexander or any of our reps? Is there anything?
I think this generally moves in a positive direction.
Okay.
I do too.
Are you good, Scott?
Yeah, so I will correspond with our state reps
Yep.
and have them support this floor amendment as it's been written.
All right, and thank Joe for reaching out.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. All right, so are you done now, Scott,
Yep.
with your stuff? Okay, so moving on, Budget Committee, Jared.
No meetings that I know of that are coming up.
Okay. PNC, Retta.
Yeah, PNC will meet again on February 1st, but I wanted to once again remind everyone that we do have the Spring Fest on April 13th at St. A's. We're going to need, we'll have a table there. We're going to need coverage from approximately 9 to 4:30. The event runs from 10 to 4. I will send out the survey tomorrow, now that I know who to include in the survey, asking for everybody's availability. But we'll be looking for 2+ hours per slot. If you can do more, that's great. The other thing, B&C has been talking about the display we're putting forward. We're working on some ideas, but one of them is to have headshots of all of the board members, so we'll have that on one of the panels. So if you don't have a high-resolution headshot, let us know. Don't take anything off the web because it'll be very grainy when we print it 8x10 glossies of each of you. We had toyed with the thought of doing baby pictures so we can match, but we're going to just go straight forward. So.
I thought senior pictures might be
Or
fun.
senior high school pictures.
Oh, no.
Black hair, I'm all for that.
Go with baby ones.
So that's it. So you'll be hearing more as the next time the board, our PNC meets, and we'll have more details.
And when do you meet again?
April 1st, 6 o'clock.
Sounds good. All right, policy, we met last week, and you'll see later we have first reads. We have another meeting April 8th at 5:30 at the SAU. C&E, Ginny?
At the CNE meeting on March 4th, Wendy Kohler presented on library practices, specifically addressing the charge from Superintendent Bulkey's memo from the fall. In her presentation, she was able to provide best practices in school libraries, data from surrounding middle schools, as well as information specific to young adult literature. At the conclusion of her presentation, she made several recommendations. These include creating a district procedure for the maintenance and weeding of book collections. Number 2, create a quarterly professional learning community time for library media specialists, both from Goffstown and New Boston. Number 3, policy committee to review policy IJL and IJLR since they haven't been reviewed since 2000. Number 4, continue the opt-in parent permission slip for grades 5 and 6 students to check out a young adult resource from the Mountain View Information Center. Number 5, continue to label all young adult materials in the Mountain View Information Center. And this is done on the spine of the book as well as the due date section of the book, each of the books in the back of the book. The C&E committee also recommended that an opt-out form for the 7th and 8th grade families be placed on the MVMS website. Though parents have always had the opportunity to opt out by calling or emailing the Library Media Center to put in a restriction on students in grades 7 and 8 by taking out young adult materials, the committee felt it would be best to have a form easily accessible. So it was a very good presentation. Wendy sent out a survey to 38 different schools who gave their information about what they do. We had information from 5 years ago at a different survey, and 38 schools responded this time, which I think was amazing because it kind of shows that all middle schools are kind of wondering where to go and what to do, and it was a great collaboration that she brought together, and the other schools were more than glad to get together and work to find a solution for their schools. So it was a great thing that you pulled off.
Ginny, if I could just mention, Amy O'Reilly, the library media specialist at Mountain View, she and I worked hand in hand in this presentation, and she just provided a lot of information and a lot of resources for me to get information. So I just want to mention Amy, because she really did a big part of that presentation.
Great, thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Ginny. Anybody have any questions? You good? Is that it?
Anybody have any questions that they want to? Okay.
Ginny, was that presentation shared with the rest of the board? Did I not see that in an email? I just didn't know if it was shared out.
I'm happy to share the entire presentation out with the board, absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Do people want it?
Yeah.
Sure. Please, that'd be great.
So, may I ask just a question? So the presentation was well over an hour. Is it okay with the board if I shorten it a little bit, or would you like the full hour-long presentation? What would the board like?
You're talking about just sending out
I can just send it out, but if there's board members that would like for me just to speak publicly about the survey results especially, I'd be happy to do that if you'd like me to do that in public.
Go ahead, Jared.
Just as a question, I don't know, I'll just throw it out there, because I know a lot of our constituents in the community was interested in this conversation. Is it possible to put a recording out on GTV, a condensed deck or just something so that we can have direct communication from you to the public on what what was found and what the recommendations are? I think it would be better for the community instead of just having it filtered through the school board.
Do you think you could take your hour-plus presentation and shrink it down to 10 minutes?
Oof.
Yeah,
I
that might be
can do my best. If you'd like me to do highlights, I can certainly do that.
30 minutes.
And I can do it. I can
30.
certainly go to GTV and do a presentation, and we can put it up on the website. I'm happy to do that.
Because I'm sure there's a lot of detail in there,
It
just
is,
from what
yeah.
Ginny's saying and what you mentioned earlier. And
Right.
I would hate that we lose that essence of all that work that was done that should probably be communicated to the public.
Yeah.
That's my opinion on that, though.
We could certainly bring it, if it's the board's pleasure, and just try to shrink it down, maybe not an hour to 10 minutes, but maybe
30.
a little shorter.
I'm sure I could do that. If the board would like me to do that, I'm happy to do that.
I
Does
think
that
that's a
sound
good
good
idea.
to everyone?
I will say the hour went very quickly.
It did. It did.
All right, is everybody good with that?
And maybe the
Dan?
paper presentation is valuable too. The paper presentation part of it is very valuable, I think.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful if I could still see that. That'd be great. Thank you.
Dan, go ahead.
I'm getting a conflict here. I'm hearing Jared looking to see if, I don't think C&E was recorded. That meeting was not
Right.
recorded.
It's
No.
not recorded.
So I was hearing that perhaps Wendy would do another recording of it and put it on GTV where we could all see it. But then I'm hearing you indicate you want to have a shrunk-down version and bring it to this committee. Those are two different things.
Yeah.
And I'm all in favor of the GTV one because I think the details are important. And I leave it up to you guys to set the agenda on the other one. But I didn't want it to get lost as the one thing.
Right.
But keep it as two.
I was suggesting it's one thing. So instead of it being a separate presentation at that Wendy does through GTV, I would just have Wendy come and present to the board, and then it's just part of the meeting record.
Right. Go ahead, Scott.
I'd like to explore of this doing internally. GTV is not going to be able to assist us in some of these endeavors for the short period of time. So we'll have to do it internally, whether we record ourselves on Teams. They're going to be very, very limited in what they can do for us in the short term.
Right. So maybe something here at
Yeah,
the board at some point over the next couple of meetings. Would that be?
Well, if there's recommendations, I'm sure that we have to take votes on it anyway, but
Yeah.
it's just making sure that the public
public
understands
sees
the
what-
awesome work
Right.
that was done behind this
Yeah,
and really
absolutely.
appreciates it.
And we did have the public there at this meeting, which
Yes,
was
there were some
awesome,
people.
because
Yeah.
usually we don't, so.
Right.
Yep, I'm happy to
Okay.
come back to the board. We'll
Is
figure out a
everybody good
meeting
with that?
date in the near future, and I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you,
All right.
Wendy.
Everybody good? All right, so when's your next meeting?
Our next meeting is April 8th at 7 at the SAU.
Thank you, Jenny. All right, SAU board meeting. Shane?
SAU 19 board will meet on April 3rd or 4th, Mrs. Moore, and I'm not sure if we're waiting on a date to find consensus or.
It was more back, is it one day to another?
And we've already floated
Third.
the date
Third.
to New Boston.
April 3rd.
April 3rd,
3rd.
Third
Which is a
fine with
Wednesday,
me.
right?
Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah, the 3rd is.
Do we have
the
a-
So the
best.
3rd is a Wednesday, the 4th is a Thursday.
Fourth was better for me, but that's what it is.
So
That
is
sound like
the-
I'm outvoted.
Is the 3rd seem to be good for everybody, Wednesday?
Yes,
And you said 6:30?
yes.
Yeah.
So April 3rd, Denise?
All right. So the SAU 19 board will meet on April 3rd at 6:30 at the SAU office.
Thank you,
Great.
Shane.
Thank you.
All right, Dan, you have technology committee report?
We haven't set the meeting yet, but I should hear from Mr. Bourget after he gets through the 100-plus page report. And I did see him tonight, but I didn't think of asking him for an update, so
Okay,
could be within the next few weeks.
sounds good. All right, thank you,
Thank you.
Dan. All right, superintendent's report.
Thank you. So just a few things to bring to the board tonight. Mr. Carbonell, we do an orientation for new school board members here. We started doing this, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. You're the only new guy, so we'll be glad to have you come in, and we'll do that just with you. So we'll reach out to you, but we do a little bit of an orientation. The School Boards Association, as Retta mentioned, also does new board member orientation, but it's usually not until later in April, so we try to do something closer to the election. So we'll reach out to you on that. Thank you for confirming the date for the SAU board meeting. We'll reach out to New Boston and make sure that we get that moving forward. So this is our first meeting that we've had since the passing of David Steffen, and I wanted to just pause for a minute and send our love and support to David's family, as well as our partners at GTV. So this is obviously a really hard thing for all of us. David's calling hours are this Thursday from 11 to 3. If board members are interested in that information, we're happy to send that out. Mr. Gross indicated that I was going to speak briefly to the default budget, so I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So this is the first default budget that the Goffstown School District has had in 11 years. The delta between the proposed budget and the default budget is $307,000. So I want to continue to make progress and continue to move our system forward. I do not want forward momentum to stop because we're on a default budget. So I think it's important for us to continue to make good forward progress. With a default budget, we're going to have less ability to address the unknown. So one thing that immediately calls out to us is when we're budgeting out a year and a half by the time we're budgeting and then making expenditures. So our ability to respond to things that break, things that have issues, will likely be compromised next year. So I want everyone to know that. And we would obviously anticipate having less available for fund balance. So we're going to have to tighten our spending for FY25, and we'll have to likely monitor things much more closely than we have in the past. Our first preliminary run through the budget, as I said, we still need to continue to make forward progress on teaching and learning. That will include new courses that this board has already approved for Goffstown High School for next year. I don't want any of those courses to be impacted by being on a default budget. But as we move forward, some of the budget lines that we will have to watch, we'll have to look at very carefully. Our preliminary analysis, so we had our SAU leadership team has gone through and we met this past week. And we were looking to add or to restore 3 bus runs next year. Since COVID, we've had a reduction in the number of buses that we've had. We've had challenges associated with hiring and retaining bus drivers. We had planned to reinstore 3 runs for next year. The board will recall we just added additional run just in the last month. We had hoped to restore 3 runs next year. That will be deferred. There are a number of important technology projects that we will continue to prioritize. The big 3 will be Schoology, Kaltura, and the Wonders program. So again, we need to continue to move teaching and learning forward, even though we're on a default budget. For facilities and technology, projects will have to be deferred, and will likely have to be, we'll have to make decisions about some of the projects that we had planned on doing, and some of those are just gonna have to wait. So that's just the reality. The $307,000 that we had, that was the delta between the proposed budget and the default, included a lot of facilities projects, increases in facility lines that corresponded with our actuals. So again, some of those things, some of those budget lines will need to continue to be overspent. And another good example would be our substitute teacher line. So we had an additional $30,000 that was added to the teacher line, the substitute teacher line. That money is not there. Those costs will still continue to be incurred by the school district. So another piece that we'll talk a little bit about is, in the past, we have never restricted principals from hiring staff. We've never given directives on restricting the level of experience that our staff have. We're going to have to look at that this year. So this past hiring season, we did a really great job hiring experienced teachers. Our average year's experience for teachers that we hired this year in the Goffstown School District was 10 years. So that comes at a cost. You're bringing in more expensive teachers. So I think that's another example of something that we're just going to have to be mindful about. So I wanted to let the board know that this will cause pain for us being on a default budget, but we need to continue to move forward with our objectives, with our teaching and learning priorities, and not have those be impacted by this. I would anticipate that in the weeks to come, we'll continue to work on this, but at least I wanted to give the board a sense that we've met, Mr. Gross and I, Mrs. Kohler, Mrs. McGrath, Mr. Bourget, Mr. Loring, our SAU leadership team, and these are our first kind of glance at looking at the circumstances of being on a default budget. So I would stop there and ask if there are any questions that board members have for me, anything I can clarify, or anything that Scott or I can add a little more context to with respect to the default budget.
Go ahead, Nicole.
So you said we'd have to possibly reduce the substitute teacher line, which was, I believe, increased possibly by Jared, to make sure that it was in line with our actuals. So if we're going to have to keep spending on substitutes, what ends up happening? But we still need to spend the money, so.
Yeah, so a couple things that you're going to see. Our default budget actually restores, Scott, correct me if I get my numbers wrong, about $160,000 of cuts that were being proposed. So our budget included reductions to the budget as well as new increased spending. So the reductions in the budget total $160,000. So what we're going to, or at least what we've been talking about doing, is identifying all of those cuts and doing one budget transfer of that entire amount so that it's clear to the board. You can all see it. You know exactly what was part of that budget transfer because we are not planning to spend that $160,000. We would, however, anticipate using that $160,000 towards some of the things that I've already mentioned. So that would include Schoology, Kaltura, our Wonders program costs. So some of those other things will come forward with recommendations. And again, the Goffstown School District hasn't had a default budget in a long time. So we have much better accounting systems now than we did in the past. Scott, you want to add anything about what we were thinking of, about how we would do that budget transfer?
I think you framed it pretty well in the sense that about half of this shortfall would be in not restoring the 3 bus runs. In looking through, and Nicole, it kind of touches what you did, is that we are going to have teacher substitutes, we're going to have electricity or propane charges, and I think we have to do what we do every year, and that's monitor. So, and as the superintendent stated earlier, is that these are budgets, they're estimates, and it reduces our ability to kind of deal with, changes that happen, like a special ed placement that was not planned for, et cetera. So it does put more heightened scrutiny on monitoring our monthly expenses and making sure that we always make sure that expenses are justified, don't get me wrong, but now it's even more heightened in terms of what we do. So the other parts of it that every once in a while, like, we'll see where our expenses are lower than budget. So as we go through, like, the summer or even the fall, sometimes we'll see that we might see that our summer school or our ESY programming was slightly less. So then that might help us a little bit. So it's gonna be over time. I don't think this is one where we're going to be like, okay, on this date we're doing all of these budget transfers. I see this as something that's going to be, maybe half of it will be with the transportation side, but the other half is going to be a wait and see. And knowing that, kind of what we do right now, sometimes I put a freeze on things because I know we've got a special ed placement or something. So, but I don't think, Brian, that we're going to be like, this is a list and we're going to check off the list. I don't see that as prudent at this point.
Thank you, Scott. Anyone else? No? Okay, go ahead.
That was all I had.
All right. Oh, that's it?
That's it.
All right. All right, moving on to old business. We are to approve the parent-student handbook. Did everybody have a chance to read everything that was sent? So we'll need a motion for that.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the parent-student handbook for all the schools, Glen Lake, Bartlett, Maple Ave, Mountain View, and the high school as recommended.
Thank you, Jenny. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Nicole. Oh, sorry. I
It's okay.
saw her hand first. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. All right, so we have second read policies that we need motions for. When we were here last, EHAA, there was a question on some verbiage. So we went back to policy and talked to Stephen. So we just took the information from policy AC. You can see it in.
Yeah, I actually don't see that
I know.
policy in my packet.
I don't see it either. I have it in my old packet. Yeah, I don't see it in this packet, unless it's in the other packet.
I have,
Do you have EH? No, okay.
what are we looking for?
So
EHAA.
maybe we can skip EHAA and we'll
And
bring
do
that.
it next.
We'll do
Okay,
that next
'cause,
time.
yeah, we did change the verbiage, Nicole, so we can bring that back next time.
Thank you.
All right, so EHAB, we're gonna go on with that one. So I'll need a motion.
Move to approve EHAB as presented.
Thank you, Nicole. Do I have a second?
Full second.
By Caroline. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. The next one is GBEFR.
I'll make a motion to approve regulation GBEFR as presented.
Thank you, Shane. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Nicole. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. The next one is JICLR.
I'll make a motion to approve regulation JICLR as presented.
Thank you, Shane. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Nicole. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. And the last one is IMG.
This is one of my favorites, so I will make a motion to approve policy IMG as presented. I feel like we've been working on that one for a while.
Yes, thank you, Shane. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Ginny. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. And we will bring EHAA back next time because we did change that a little bit. All right, so now we have new business, which is new policies. So these are first reads. Oh, I skipped the field trip, that's all right. I'm not doing well tonight. So we have first reads, they'll come back next time.
So we have BCA first?
Yes, BCA is, we were gonna hand that out.
Yep, so we're going to send this around.
Oh. So this is your ethics
send-
policy. Do you need more? Probably.
So in the past, this used to have a signature line, it no longer does, so we're just providing this to the board.
Yeah, so it's your ethics. Go ahead, Jenny.
I would like the signature to be required on this again. We had some things go on last year, and I would like people to sign this, that they're taking it seriously, that we, like, look this over for a minute and have people sign it, so that they know what their responsibilities are as ethical school board members.
Thank you, Jenny. Did you hear what she said, Dan?
That she's asking for a signature line again.
Yep.
Yes.
So it'd have to go back to policy.
Okay.
And discuss, because they took it off a couple,
We
few years
can, but-
ago. I think it was taken off a few years ago.
It was?
I would support that as well.
Are you, I mean, am I the only one, or
What is
people
everybody's
feel that?
consensus? It'll go back to policy, but is this something everybody wants to see?
Excuse me, what is it that you're looking for?
Signatures again.
I'm looking for the signature back on it. I feel it gives it a little bit more
Right,
backbone.
normally you would just sign it and date it and move it on to the next person and the next person.
Yeah,
I
we,
have them all at work that way. I have them at the SAU that way. You just sign the back.
Signed it and put it back on, okay.
Yeah, I don't believe we ever had signature lines on it.
no.
Okay.
And we weren't requiring.
There
We
was-
weren't,
It
but
was
we
still
used,
again.
we used to,
It was
it used to
verbiage,
be
yeah.
required.
That's it.
Yeah, it used to be,
And
and then
I-
it got taken off.
I just would like a little more emphasis on it.
Yeah. So what does everybody think? Go ahead, Dan.
No, it was removed. One of the reasons I believe it was removed is there's no legislative mandate for it. There's no RSA that allows us to do that.
Right.
I mean, to require it.
Right.
If we want to voluntarily do that, go ahead, sign it and pass it in.
Do
But
we
there's
need an
nothing that-
RSA to require it?
Yeah, we are a state that says you can do things only if it's been told we can do stuff. That's how I understand it.
I don't have a problem with having a line to let people voluntarily sign and hand it back in.
But
You
I
don't even
think,
have to
I
have a
think
line,
if
you
you
can just
take
sign
the
it.
ethics policy seriously, whether it's under an RSA to require it, then you would sign it, because you're taking it seriously and that you're going to follow the ethics policy as written.
Go ahead, Judge.
I'd just like to make a motion that we recognize ethics policy BCA, not only acknowledge it, but support it and try to live by it as part of our process. That way it's in the minutes of whether we support it or not.
I'll second that.
And Dan will second. Any further discussion on that motion?
Are we doing this instead of the signature? Is that the suggestion?
Well, for right now, we're making an acknowledgement that we've received this, and we will conduct business under this policy like we do all others. And I think it's in the minutes and everybody's voting yes, then that is our verbal acknowledgement that we're doing this.
Yeah. Go ahead, Shane.
And I would say that if people wanted to go back to policy, it can. Just there's no RSA, so there's no
Right.
one has to sign it per se.
Exactly.
But I'm happy to look at it in policy.
All right, so I have a motion, I have a second. Any further discussion? Okay, so this is adhering to the ethics policy as a board member. So if you vote yes, you're agreeing to this, and if you vote no, you're not. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? All right, it looks like it was unanimous. All right, and then we can bring it back to policy just to review.
Yeah, it's been, what, 4 years?
Yeah.
Almost.
All right, we have a field trip.
We actually have two, so the agenda lists one, and I have a second that I need to bring to the board. The first one is a field trip that is going to the Peabody Museum of Archaeology in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Sounds like a lot of fun to me. So we would be asking for your approval. There are 13 students going and 1 or 2 chaperones. So it's a fairly small group. There's a cost of $10 per student for the trip. So because it's out of state, we would ask for your authorization for that.
All right, any questions? All right, I'll need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the Goffstown High School field trip to the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology
Yeah.
as presented.
Thanks, Shane. Do I have a
Second.
second by Ginny? Any further discussion? Seeing, oh, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, is this transportation? How are we getting down there and back?
They're taking a small bus, I believe.
Okay.
So it's part of the cost.
Yeah, so they're going to be together as a group. It's
They're going to be
not-
together as a group.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Anyone else? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. Have a great time.
So I have a second one, if I may, and I
Okay.
apologize that this came in after we had already sent out the agenda.
Okay.
So we have a request from our athletic director for a preseason baseball game on March 30th, which is a Saturday, to take 15 student athletes and 4 chaperones to a couple of games in Connecticut.
Wow. So I take it's overnight?
It's not overnight, it's a day
Oh.
trip, but because it's out of state,
Yep, you have to get
they need approval.
Anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Shane.
Are there any costs associated with this, or are they free games, or?
So I believe the game is free, there's cost associated with the bus, but we're gonna contribute what we would normally contribute for any bus run, and then if it's more because it's out of state, that will be up to the Boosters Club.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Dan.
Is this part of the new statistics class, or is this something different?
I believe this is a connection that our baseball coach has with other baseball coaches. This is a new thing for us.
But it's a Saturday.
It's a
So they're
Saturday.
not pulling kids out of class.
We're not pulling anyone out of class.
Yeah.
We're not wasting time driving to Connecticut and back.
Yeah.
It's usually seeing some really good teams play, you know.
Do we know what games they are?
Uh,
That might
You
sway
look,
me.
you.
We don't.
If they're good games, maybe.
I would move to approve the field trip to the baseball games in Connecticut as presented.
Thank you, Nicole. Do I have a second? By Caroline. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. Have fun on that trip.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right, so now we have first reads, so there's a bunch here that we just did last week, so they'll come back next time for questions and answers. All right, staffing.
Okay, so we have quite a few things on the staffing sheet today. We have a few notifications, FYI for the board. We have 2 leave of absences, 1 long-term substitute, and teacher change in FTE for the remainder of the year with 1 increase and 1 decrease. So those are FYI only notifications. For your approval, we have 3 teacher resignations.
All right, so we'll do resignations first. I'll need a motion.
Motion to approve the teacher resignations as presented.
All right, thank you, Caroline. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
By Retta. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous.
Okay, next we have a teacher nomination. This is the first of many teachers for next school year.
Nice. So I'll need a
So
motion.
this is Mrs. McCann. being out ahead of it, as always.
Motion to approve the teacher nomination for the health teacher of the high school.
Thank you,
Second.
Caroline. And Ginny, second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. All right.
We have a resignation from our speech language pathology assistant. These are challenging for us to fill.
Motion to approve the resignation of the speech and language pathology assistant at Glen Lake.
Thank you, Caroline. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Shane. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. And the next one?
The next one is a support staff nomination for a registered behavior technician. So this is an SSS position for us at Mountain View Middle School.
All right, I'll need a motion.
Motion to approve the nomination to registered behavior technician at MVMS.
Thank you, Caroline. Do I have a
Second.
second by Ginny? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. And then sports.
Yeah, so lastly, what you see here are all of our nominations, I think, for all of our spring athletics. I would point out the Ns that you see on the staffing sheet indicate new. So just as I look at this, the sheer number of returning coaches is significant. So I just want to point out, on the front sheet of this, there are only 2 new people, and they're both volunteers for our baseball program. So we continue to benefit tremendously from volunteers, and we're so appreciative of the time that people give us. And on the back side of the sheet, out of 12 or 14 names, there's only, again, 1 new person. So many thanks to all of these fine folks.
Absolutely. Do I have a go ahead, Retta.
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
not about this, about some of the others, so.
Oh, okay.
But I'll make a motion to approve the co-curricular sport.
Thank you, Retta. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Shane. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. Okay, Retta, go ahead.
So this is for you, Brian, and I don't know if you have the information. It looks like we have 4 resignations. Do you have any information on why the teacher's leaving? I'm like, moving to other jobs, better offers. It's always good to
I
know.
think it's likely a combination of those things.
Okay.
They'll have exit interviews?
They will. They will. They'll be offered. Mrs. McGrath does that with all of our teachers.
All right, so there's other staffing and non-public?
Yeah, there's a couple of others. So we have non-public tonight. One thing that I am asking of the board is we need to make the Maple Lab Dean of Students position permanent. So we came to you a year ago and asked for that position. That is a conversation that we can continue in non-public. We have other non-public tonight that pertains to hiring, but that is an ask of us. But we can certainly circle back to that as part of our discussion in non-public, which includes more relative to staffing.
Okay. So before we move on, in your packets, and this is also for you, Jack, being new, we have school board committee assignments. So there's a copy of who was on committees last year, and then you pick out what committees you want to be on this year. They give you the days and times to try to match your schedule. We do ask if everybody can do, at least 2, even if you're an alternate, and then get it back to me, because then I have to put it all together and then bring it back to everybody to approve. And you don't have to be on the same stuff you were on last year. If you want to change it up, that's fine too. So if anybody has any questions, just let me know. All right, any other business that may legally come?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
It came up a few weeks ago that our public comment policy might not be in accordance with the law, so just wanted to see.
It's in the queue.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that
Yeah,
was
we
happening.
have a lot of stuff in the queue.
I figured
but
as much.
It is.
Just figured I'd ask.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yep.
Anyone else? No? All right, so which one are we going into first? A? Oh, it is only A.
It's only A.
All right, so I need a motion to go into non-public session, RSA 91A 32A.
So moved.
By Caroline. And who's second? Dan? All right, roll call.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Yes, thank you, Nicole. All right, so we're in non-public. So Jack, we pack up and we go to the conference room.